There we go. Hello and welcome everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Things are a bit odd in the stream. And I can try and I don't really understand why is I don't know. It All right. Hi. Welcome to an adventure. I am Anthony Wright de Hernandez, aka Rogan27. I am the Community Collections Archivist here at Virginia Tech, and this is the once a week show where we look at things from the archives and have fun discussing them and learning from them. My Stream Deck is non-functional. I discovered this when I pushed the button to switch everything on to start. OBS updated. There is an update to the Stream Deck software, but currently the Stream Deck can't see OBS. So transitions might be a little more clunky today because I have to do everything manually. But let's see who else here. I know I saw Matt M33. Hello. Hi, Hannah. It's good to see you. Hello, Lord Portico. Welcome. And Be Right UK, thank you so very much for the 57-month resubscription. Also, Lord Portico for the 57-month resubscription. These are things that, yeah, that's a lot of months. Somehow I have been doing this show for a lot of months. Let's see. It is Wednesday. It is the last Wednesday of September, which means we are continuing with the first 5-year mission is nearly complete. You're not wrong. We are continuing with our science fiction story series. And today, what that means is a story from Thomas Calvert McClary. And this one is Shortwave Experiment from the February 1935 issue of Astounding Stories. Yep. Indeed. So, McClary. Who or what is Thomas Calvert McClary? Presumably not a what, but I suppose we'll find out. Born in 1909, died 1972, U.S. speechwriter, ghostwriter, and author. Mostly of Westerns from the early 1930s, whose science fiction began to appear in Astounding from 1934 under his own name and under the pseudonyms Thomas Calvert, Miles Kramer, and Calvin Peregoy. The story we're reading today was originally published under the pseudonym Calvin Peregoy, the latter for the Dr. Conklin series, which this is a part of. And in fact, I do not know which. I didn't have it listed, so I don't know what order this is in the series, whether it's the first or not. We'll find out, I assume. Let's see. First two science fiction novels are both set in versions of New York. Both are thought experiments in cultural engineering. Each builds on crude versions of the theory reminiscent of Buckminster Fuller that a small scientific elite, unhindered by the opportunism of businessmen and politicians, could keep the world running in decency and comfort. We have previously looked at Buckminster Fuller and his world game, so anybody who's been around for a while should be familiar. What I find especially fun at the moment is when I was preparing things for this episode and poking around to see what I could learn about the story without reading the story, I wrote the promo and it includes a quote, but I don't remember where the quote is from, and I can't find it now. It's a fun quote. I just don't know where I got it, so we'll have to read the story to see if it will give us the context necessary to understand the quote. Because the promo for this week was, "This week, Dr. Conklin sets out to abolish a heated argument about peanut brittle in Thomas Calvert McClary's Shortwave Experiment." Which is grand, except that now, if I go searching for stuff about this story that references peanut brittle, our promotional posts are the things that come to the top of the search results, and I don't know where I got that from. Thomas Calvert McClary, American writer of science fiction and westerns. He wrote under the pseudonyms T.C. McClary, Thomas Calvert, and Calvin Peregoy. Various works. isfdb. Because, yeah, this is a super short wiki article, too. I don't know where I grabbed that info. Okay, this is part 3 of the Dr. Conklin series. And I've tried doing like a quick search of stuff. I don't even know if this will. Woohoo! Main, yeah. No reviews. That one, Goodreads, not where I got it. I would love to get like a summary of the first 2 so that we know what's going on, but I don't know. Some sort of heated argument about peanut brittle apparently is important to this story, although I don't recall why. If anybody does know, feel free to share. Yeah, it's hilarious how many of the search results are just my own posts. Well, we will find out as we explore this story from Thomas Calvert McClary. February 1935. And let us dive in and see what we can find out. Because apparently I know nothing. The Ultimate Medal by Nat Shackner is what the cover art is for. Alright, let's find out what page this is on. Page 83. Ah, that's where I got it from. I knew there was a reason that I used that, and it's right there in the table of contents of Astounding Stories, February 1935. Shortwave Experiment. Dr. Conklin sets out to abolish a heated argument on peanut brittle. I didn't make it up. I don't know what it means. Oh, congratulations, Madam 33. You've been randomly selected as a VIP for the stream. Enjoy your digital gemstone and the ability to manipulate pun points. Okay. So we have more lovely art. I love the line drawings that this artist does. Dold. The artist is Dold, D-O-L-D. Isn't that just an awesome piece of art? I'm very curious what waves of force animating a human skeleton has to do with peanut brittle. Shortwave Experiment by Calvin Peregoy. And we're starting off with a name that, as soon as I see it, my brain says pineapple. Ananias, who had more than usual morbid curiosity, even for a large cat, paused with lifted paw and twitching tail. It was his feline opinion that something very unusual was happening in Shortwave Castle, and that Dr. Carl Conklin, savant and electronic genius, had been acting quite queerly for several weeks. Now, the doctor was peering around the edge of his daughter's doorway with the furtive attention of a hunter studying its quarry. For a moment, his face lighted with anticipation. His daughter and her young man, Pat Chelsea, were involved in what seemed to be an intelligent argument. Hello, Stephen Joyce. Welcome in. Then his face fell. It turned out that they were not discussing world problems or interplanetary voids. They were debating the various qualities of peanut brittle. Hello, Puddleglum. Enjoy your work lurk. The doctor gave a gesture of annoyance and turned down the hall. Ananias turned after the doctor's rapid steps. His cat's heart gave a double beat of rapture. A fast walk like that meant the doctor was bound toward the laboratories, and possibly mice or guinea pigs. If not, there was at least Calypso, the venerable parrot with the raucous squawk and highly exciting curve to its ruffled neck. Dr. Conklin was decidedly preoccupied. According to every figure and computation, results from his greatest experiment should be showing. So far, he had seen none. There was, of course, the variable factor of his daughter's receptivity to the tremendously delicate cosmic rhythms. Yet the fault of the experiment, he felt sure, was not in his figures or equipment, but in the subjects. Still, a miscalculation of as much as I don't know why I stumble on that word. Still, a miscalculation of as much as 1/10,000th of a point might distort the effect. The doctor abstractedly ruffled Calypso, the parrot, and was bitten for his pains. Turning toward a small circular paneled room, he stepped in, examined himself closely in a mirror. His face was the same apparently. Yet, yes, there was a slight difference. His eyes were less strained. Some indefinable quality about his face made it look younger. Unless his imagination was playing tricks on him, then something was happening. He snapped a button. A weird purple light seemed to emanate from every pore in the walls. There was a sharp, sparkling noise of giant arcs and the irregular metallic tinkle of decomposing elements. Dark and light shadows of deep and shallow canals, of pulpy matter, and what looked like twigs and storm-ripped branches came onto a large panel before he was standing. Wow. My apologies that I'm really stumbling on this today. Again. Dark and light shadows of deep and shallow canals, of pulpy matter, and what looked like twigs and storm-ripped branches came onto a large panel before which he was standing. The figure of a skeleton appeared beneath. It is the brain which counts, the doctor announced in pedantic tones to himself. Notice any variation in the coloring density of the posterior cornea, of the lateral ventricle. The basket work around the cells of Purkinje in the latter model may also appear more solidified. He snapped a lever. Immediately beneath the row of shadows appeared an almost identical row. The doctor's skeleton, caught by an X-ray and reproduced upon self-developing film, showed beside the skeleton already before him. Once he turned to pull the fluoroscope lever and study the various angles of his anatomy. A forgotten key and a quarter in his pocket gave him an excited moment, but he soon traced down the objects as being no sudden glandular development in his body. As he moved out of the room, the puzzled expression reappeared. The two sets of negatives of his brain had shown a decided change in the density and nerve system of cells, and his back was wetter. More liquid had appeared between the vertebrae. He was satisfied it was his experiment which had accomplished the work. Just had to fix one minor thing on the lighting to hopefully not have as much shadows when I moved my hands, but anywho. So far, the writing is fine. I apparently am stumbling on words today. The giant atomic laboratory, with its decomposing machines, atom guns, blast and slow burner furnaces, giant arcs and tubes, caused him to pause. He switched on a tiny, invisible, infrared ray, guided it against the side of his head while adjusting the bolometer, the electric thermometer sensitive to 1/1,000,000th of a degree. He watched its action recorded on a circular graph which automatically computed time and skull thickness and such matters as heat variation with each breath and heart action, dispersion of heat, slight chemical reaction, nature's automatic guards against sunburn, and other physical factors. At length, he nodded, switched off the mechanism. Whether forward or backward, his figures came out the same. That the experiment was working, there could be no doubt. It was working on him, as could be seen by the X-ray and the radio brain cell fluoroscope. That delicate instrument which showed a precise two-dimensional reproduction of what was at any given point within the area depth of an object at which it was set. His experiment recorded when greatly intensified, and it worked according to his figures. No, it wasn't possible he was wrong. Walking on, he came to his control rooms, inspected the angle of 4 giant reflecting and dispersing crystals, moved one slightly. There was a deafening blast from giant twisting tubes. The piquant stench of burning copper as the crystal traveled a fraction too far. The doctor guided the crystal to its proper place with little concern. Mere billions of heat energy units and their potential destructive power counted for little in his laboratories. Helonia gets. He paused over the atomic transformer, clicked at his teeth sharply. If Megs had only developed an interest in science, he could have had her help on this. Instead, like other young girls of 20, she had studied idiotic styles, the most attractive coiffures, what shades of polish were most becoming on her nails. That, from the sole offspring of the world's most brilliant scientist. But the young giant with the jaws of a carnivorous animal, the mental makeup of a good-natured young bull, and the amazing ability to actually prefer thinking of football and hockey to science, philosophy, and economics, had been one too much for the doctor. Not even his fondness for his daughter could prevent Carl Conklin from recognizing the truth made particularly apparent through the prospective family union. The doctor shook his head. Here were 2 healthy, supposedly normal, and fairly intelligent young people. And they had been gibbering was the word the doctor thought of, with full concentration upon the subject of peanut brittle. 1/100th of his potential thought power was what man used to guide himself through an existence becoming more complex and dangerous day by day. Dr. Conklin turned into another room. One side was filled with wildly twisting, fluttering metal bands. The weird music of science, palpitated upon the air, came as attuned vibrations. Some of the bands spoke softly, a bare whisper so fine yet potent that nothing by millions of miles of the most absorbing material could keep them from piercing to their destined destination, yet they must be amplified thousands of times to be heard. He noted meters, smiled with reasonable appreciation of the work. It had not been simple to get those varying vibrations in accord, to bring each to its necessary potency and mix them into a compound entity of vibration color to broadcast with the cosmic rays across the room. The author has a particular sentence construction that he likes to use, that it's come up a number of times, and it is frustrating to me. This sentence here is an example. He noted meters, comma, smiled with reasonable appreciation of the work. This is, he noted meters, and he smiled with reasonable appreciation of the work. Okay, so this is me not being an expert in language arts. I believe that is called a comma splice and is best avoided. Am I correct that that is a comma splice? Because I don't like the way it feels to read it. It's missing the word and. It would be fine if the word and was there. Two independent clauses. Some people consider it a type of run-on sentence, while other people think of it as a punctuation error. So technically not a comma splice because there is no subject after the comma. It's still using the subject from before the comma. So it would need to have a subject after the comma for it to be a comma splice, but it really feels like one. And it is uncomfortable to read. I don't know why it's uncomfortable. Like, I don't know what grammatical rule it is breaking, but it feels strange. And it does not feel correct. Anyway, I kept running across it and needed to say something. If anybody does know specifically what English grammatical issue is happening there, feel free to share. He glanced at the meter indices, long strips of metal, stone and crystal, glowing with strange, unearthly lights and whining in keys and pitches never heard by other Earth beings. These colors were not the actual colors of the cosmic rays, but it had been necessary to arrange some means of ration in intensity measurement, and these mineral colors were the nearest approach possible to see with Earth instruments and measure in Earth measurements. For a long time, he sat at an amplifying board measuring vibrations. He studied his equipment inch by inch, the great lengths of stranded wire, some so fine it had to be highly magnified to be seen at all. The mass of twisted and contorted tubes, buzzing and glowing with strange fires, the scintillating and dispersing crystals and prisms, the transformer and condenser tubes. Some measured in temperature units, others in pressure, others in light intensity, still others in oscillations. At length, he stood satisfied, his mind computing and working in cubes of running so tremendous that he must think of them by symbols rather than as numbers. Sorry, I have to reread that sentence because I didn't understand it. At length he stood satisfied, his mind computing and working in cubes running so tremendous that he must think of them by symbols rather than as numbers. Okay, so he's working with cubed numbers that are very large. He snapped a plug into a socket on a switchboard, listened in on Meg's conversation in the living room. The conversation had switched to hockey. He listened carefully. It was not even intelligent, well-ordered conversation of that barbarous game. Well, that settled it. The doctor was going to give them treatment of such strength that something had to happen. He had limited his experiment to a small radius surrounding the castle. Megs, Pat, and himself would be the only ones to feel the effects. The servants he had guarded by insulating their quarters. The doctor's hands darted to adjust delays, to controls, which would hold in, The doctor's hands darted to adjust delays, to controls which would hold in check the stupendous forces which he was working until he could bring all into line. With which he was working. Broadcast the component rays, waves, and vibrations over one narrow channel in synchronized correlated speed. The myriad colors of the rainbow of the vaster cosmic universe flashed and snapped, gnashed powerfully to find release from confines. A giant mauve arc hissed overhead. The ear-splitting crash of elements being torn apart by electrical, cosmic, and atomic power smote the air with a pulse beat. The echo was like the tinkle of broken ice. The room filled with speeding, falling, twisting, and chasing pinpoints of light, the glitter of cosmic emeralds and diamonds. It was, at one time, the most beautiful, awesome, and frightening sight ever seen by man. A crescending cascade of vibrations, overpowering in their sweeping psychic effect, yet appalling in the striking blast of raw planet power. Then the forces were combined, released upon the air. A sudden silence, the motionless aftermath of a cataclysmic storm, fell upon the room. There was the barely audible hum of small tubes. Dr. Conklin's eyes sparkled brightly. So might some dope make them sparkle, but the doctor used no narcotics. Leaping up, he tore through the laboratories. Ananias barely had time to leap clear of the doctor's flying feet. His attention had been absorbed upon the arch of Calypso's neck. Now he stood with arched back, hissing after the doctor's retreating steps. Something, he did not know quite what, was taking place inside of him. It was something over which he had no control. Foreign element had entered his being, not with the pleasant sensation of a piece of fish, but as if taking control of his body and putting himself, out. With a sudden shriek, Ananias leapt 3 times into the air and tore out through the open door. Calypso the parrot cocked open an eye and watched the departure. "Damned fool," he muttered, and retired back into mystic communion with recollections of 143 years. Ananias's flight was not halted by curiosity this time. He raced past the scientist without even noting that for his master to be sprawled out on the floor before Meg's living room door was somewhat more peculiar than anything so far. From his prone position, the doctor was making an acute study of his daughter's face and present conversation. Outside of a rather startled expression when he first arrived at the room, her features were the same as always. Beautiful, hilarious, and somewhat vacant. Nothing happened to alter them. She maintained the subject of hockey with a heated, if not very intelligent, argument. Rather dejectedly, the doctor arose unseen, went off to the servants' quarters. Carefully, he examined the shielding wires insulating those rooms from the cosmic vibrations. It was important that nobody know what he was up to. He must have unsuspecting minds to work with. Mrs. O'Leary unexpectedly swept out of the kitchen, causing the doctor to jump back guiltily. She gave him a curious look, returned to the kitchen to announce she had caught him snooping again for the 5th time in 3 weeks. Dr. Conklin had heard the comment. Reddening, he considered the fact that his secret experiment was liable to cost him prestige, possibly ptomaine as well, in his own household. Okay, What is domain? I do not know this word. P-T-O-M-A-I-N-E. Oh! Hello! Welcome in, Raiders! I hope that everything was going spectacularly over at the League of Whimsy. Welcome, Eric. It is good to see you, and welcome, Raiders. I am Anthony Wright Day Hernandez, Community Collections Archivist at Virginia Tech, aka Rogan27, and this is Archival Adventures. This week, we're continuing an ongoing series of 1930s era pulp science fiction with a story called Shortwave Experiment by Thomas Calvert McClary, written under the pseudonym Calvin Peregoy. And yeah, it's the third in his Dr. Conklin series, if anybody happens to be familiar with that. Castabras, thank you for showing up. Hello, hello. If anybody here is not following 16-Bit Eric, I do highly recommend his channel. Eric is a wonderful streamer, has a lovely community, and can go on lengthy and informative discourses on such subjects as tabletop role-playing games, ADHD, Buddhism, video games, etc. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, drop a follow. Yes, Eric is just +1 for Eric being lovely, indeed. We reading this story so far, the story is primarily from the perspective of a cat. There is a Dr. Conklin who has a castle. His daughter and potential son-in-law have been arguing / having discussions, initially about peanut brittle, and now about hockey. And he seems to be running some sort of experiment with electrical energy force of some sort that I think is intended to raise the intelligence of people. I don't know yet. We have not quite figured out yet. It does not seem to have worked on his daughter, but we have not learned yet whether anything has happened to his potential son-in-law. But the cat, Ananias, definitely is having a reaction. So, but we just came across a word that I don't know, and so I was looking it up. Domain. Liable to cost him prestige, possibly domain as well, in his own household. Any of various organic bases which are formed by the action of putrefactive bacteria on nitrogenous matter, and some of which are poisonous? That does not seem like the definition we would be looking for. This is not... I don't understand what putrefaction of vegetable matter or organic matter would have to do in this sentence. I have no idea. Although it does seem like there is some association with poisoning, so the fact that it was the cook. Maybe cost him prestige and possibly poisoning in his own household? I'm uncertain. Mrs. O'Leary was a woman given to strong opinion and somewhat violent action. At least he had learned one thing. Whatever effect his experiment was having over the rest of the household, his insulation screen was working properly. With thoughtful countenance, the doctor headed back to his laboratories. It was simply impossible. Something must be happening. Pausing at Meg's door again, he peered cautiously in, listened. The conversation had changed from hockey. It was now about snake hunting and its excitement. Such was the continuity of human thought. It switched rapidly to the superiority of special brands of shoe lacquer. The doctor shook his head disgustedly. The argument had gone on intermittently for years. In less time than they had spent arguing the matter, they could have made laboratory tests of every known brand. He raced back to the laboratories, studied the intricate, delicate mechanism again. He checked and rechecked his calculations. With desperation, he threw up the power, increased the treatment. He found himself on the floor, recovering from shock a few moments later. But he found Megs and Pat still talking about shoe lacquer. It was impossible for his experiment not to work. Yet apparently it was working only on the doctor. Dr. Conklin watched life under the castle roof avidly. His eyes, Megs noted to Pat, were growing astonishingly bright, and his speech faster. Decidedly, she thought her father was up to something, but what? She couldn't find out. All that week, the doctor prowled. He would appear with almost violent unexpectedness, or be caught prowling softly down the hall, or lurking behind doors. It wasn't possible, Mrs. O'Leary said, that he had become a little weak upstairs. But she didn't sound very convinced. The doctor decided that he was expecting too much in too short of a time. He made new calculations. If he intensified the experiment and gave 3 weeks longer, then at the outside, definite signs should become evident. Retiring to his laboratories, he announced he would not be seen for 3 weeks. Megs merely shrugged. Periodically, he cooped himself up. She had more important matters to worry about. Her nearing wedding day, for instance. The main trouble with the world, the doctor told Calypso, is that people don't use their brains. If they did, there would be few world problems. Calypso is a parrot. Nuts! Squawked Callisto. The doctor continued, long accustomed to Calypso's undignified opinions on all subjects excepting dates and crackers. In 3 weeks, we will see results. Megs will stop getting into arguments on peanut brittle. More serious subjects will be on her mind, and that young giant of hers will turn his brain to higher things than hockey and snake hunting. Having cleared his troubles from his mind, the doctor increased the flow of rays. With the remarkable concentration to which he had trained himself, he put the entire experiment out of mind for the 3-week period. Brains! We're not quite to Halloween yet, but I do appreciate. But downstairs, a sense of dread, foreboding, pervaded the atmosphere. Ananias once actually drove Mrs. Haggerty away from the food she was preparing, while he calmly chose the best fish for himself and marched off to unknown parts. Inspector, the half-wolf dog, came in several times with a triumphant expression and great gashes upon his shoulders. At the exact end of 3 weeks, Dr. Conklin made the delicate adjustments upon which hung the success of his colossal experiment. Beneath the castle walls, he saw wolves circling in immense packs. They howled mournfully, a noticeable discordancy in their voices. Momentarily, his mind lingered on the wolves. It had not been a hard winter. Food was plentiful. It was peculiar they should be gathered in such large packs. Their cries, too, were unusual. No particular note, such as the hunting or mating cries, predominated. It was more like a babble of wolf jargon. He shivered, turned inside, gave the last burst of cosmic treatment. What had happened to Megs and Pat, he did not know. He did not know quite what he expected, even. But something must have happened. Some effects show. After this time, seeing them abruptly, he would be more acutely conscious of any change. Descending the tower, the doctor listened in at the door of Megs's rooms. She was heatedly holding forth on the benefits of marrying Pat and living in Paris, where she could be a few months in advance of Styles. The doctor's brow grew moist as he eavesdropped. There was no great change in his daughter's ideas. This sounded like anything she might ever have said. But she was offering astonishingly logical arguments which had taken thought, a lot of it, and consideration of all angles. Certainly his experiment had borne fruit, but what fruit? With bated breath, he waited for Pat's reply. "I've got it," Pat suddenly boomed. "Megs, I'll be the hockey genius of the world. Napoleon used a lot of the tactics in his military moves. But I've improved on his theories. He forgot 1 or 2 important mathematical elements." The doctor's heart pounded with a deep sense of failure. He had tried to produce greater use of brains. Brain power had not done Megs any good. She had simply used it to think out more forceful and intelligent arguments to back the whimsical ideas she had always had. In Pat's case, his mind had leapt beyond the instinctive stage it had always dwelled in, but increased brain power had not broadened his intellect. He had simply applied greater intelligence to his native interests. The doctor compared the two with himself. Excepting for faster thinking and a sense of immense acuteness, he could find the experiment had changed him little. But his brain had been highly trained for years. What happened was simply that lower brains with greater room for expansion had leapt ahead in capacity for thought, but without changing basic interests. A complete idiot with an obsession for eating bananas would have simply used greater imagination and intelligence in getting hold of bananas. Wearily, the doctor turned away. He had hoped to make real thinkers of these two, real thinkers of the world. The X factor in his calculations had thrown his plans off course. Perhaps there was still some means of making his theory work out. At the head of the stairway, the doctor looked down on Ananias, the cat, and Inspector, the dog. They were just passing each other below. "How are you, kid?" Ananias asked in a meowy voice. The doctor jumped. Yes, it was certainly the cat that had spoken. There was nobody else down there to speak. I'd be a hell of a lot better if there weren't so many wolves outside, Inspector growled. I don't suppose Papa Conklin knows it yet, but I'm about the only protection this castle has against that pack, in spite of all his fancy equipment. Those babes outside are out to storm this place. The two animals danced off toward the cellar together. The doctor continued on his way. So that was what the rays had done. While Pat and Megs had been stimulated to use a little more intelligence, animal brains had been stimulated to full use. Cells which had been undeveloped and dormant had been thrown into service. Domestic animals with memory of the spoken language would be capable of human thought and speech, but their basic natures would remain. Then the wolves outside were not there by coincidence. They had mobilized for a planned attack upon the fortress of those they hated, man and man's protector, the dog. They were hindered by a lack of language, but that would come. Loose upon the world, cosmic rays would not accomplish intelligent and broader thought on life and problems. It would simply increase the thought power applied to basic desires and conceptions. Criminals might become brilliant, but not honest. The killer would simply work out more intelligent methods of committing murder and avoiding detection. Hi, Obi. And, Shadows, thank you for the bit. The doctor dragged his feet toward the control room. It had taken years to adjust properly. There's no way to get around basic nature, the doctor muttered wearily. Well, he would put the cosmic power where there was no chance of wolves and inferior brains making themselves masters of the world through it. He would destroy it. Blow the tubes. Walking toward the master switch, he threw on the juice, crossed two wires. There was a terrific roar, a violent burst of flame. Then complete quiet inside the castle. Through the quiet came the wall-dimmed howl of the wolves. The equipment was destroyed. A truly improved intelligence killer would realize how futile killing is. Probably, yeah. Wow, what a racket, Calypso squawked as she picked herself off the floor and waddled toward a cracker bowl. Damned fool! If you'd given that blue gadget more juice in the first place, you'd have done the trick. You figured you'd make everybody an individual. What you needed was to stimulate the desire of man and beast to copy the civilization and intellect of those above them. It would have been an endless chain of intellectual development. The wolves would want to be like the dogs, and the dogs like you, and you'd have wanted to be like me. And you'd have wanted to be like me, Doc. I haven't lived 143 years for nothing. Well, let's have a cracker. Here's looking at you. That is the end of Shortwave Experiment. So the question that we must now consider is, does that story qualify as classic? Because it was on the list that that Moskowitz, the science fiction editor or critic, in 1940 called classics, even though they were only like 5 or 6 years old. So in 1940, he said that this was a classic. And I don't know, is it actually classic? We are actually being attacked by advertisements right now. So I'm actually going to take a quick break. And we'll talk about the story in a moment. Okay. The advertisements should be over now. So yeah. Of all of the stories we've read, this one feels the least classic to me. Like, it's a good story. I guess the idea of like uplifting lower species with like the cats and dogs and whatnot becoming more intelligent is a thread that stays in science fiction. But otherwise, I'm not really certain. The fictional the fictional effect of cosmic rays may be actually more of a through line to modern sci-fi. Definitely fiction. The only thing cosmic rays give you is cancer. Yeah. I think the saddest disqualifier is that I've consumed a lot of sci-fi media but never heard of this one. Obi, I would say most of the stories that we have read in this list, which this is number 12 that we've read, I don't know that I have been familiar with any of them. And not even particularly with the authors. But all of the others had what I would call persistent memes within the genre. They've all had elements where it was like, oh yeah, this thing that was relatively new or brand new in that story is in like every sci-fi today. We had one where it was like, oh, well, that story felt like the origin story of a Batman villain. So the previous 11 stories have all, I could see why they would be called classics, even though they have not as themselves become sort of ubiquitously known. This one, I don't know that it has any particular elements like that where I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, this stands out. This element of this story has persisted through, like, and is in lots of sci-fi today. The sting at the end that the parrot / macaw is smarter than humans is a modern through line with Douglas Adams. So long and thanks for all the fish. Absolutely. And I actually like, I thought it was kind of funny. It basically ended with a punchline. I'm curious. So this was the third in his series. I don't know how coherent it is as a series, or if they're just independent stories about Dr. Conklin, because I haven't read the other two. I found it interesting that it was told initially from the perspective of the cat, and I've definitely seen other sci-fi tales where some sort of uplifted animal is the narrator. But really, it's just the mad scientist that is attempting to make some sort of energy ray to affect the world and to affect other people. That sort of is a thing, but other than that, I'm not really sure. I think this is the first one where I'm like, I don't know if it stands up with the others. It's interesting. It's kind of funny. It's a little thought-provoking, but I don't know that it's as good as the other stories that have been on the list. With a contemporary to the story, Echo to Physics, learning about cathode rays. I know. So here's our primary narrator, Ananias, the cat. Sadly, Calypso the parrot is not in the picture. And this, I thought it was just a skeleton, but it's actually a reflection. Or it's the, like, the image of his skeleton projected onto the screen. Anyway, it was a good story. I just don't know that it was as good as the previous ones. So I'm curious, there will be at least one more story by the same author. Or no, we had one story by this author previously, Rebirth, that we read last November. It was the third story. I'm trying to remember it now, but we definitely thought it was one. I think that was the one where we jumped forward in time really far and we're encountering a dead and overgrown civilization and that sort of thing. I think that's the one that was. And it was, yeah, it stood up with the others as far as like, oh yeah, that shows up in today's stories. Whereas, I don't know, this one, I think there are elements that persist through to today. I think it's a good story. I personally don't think that it belongs on the same list as the other ones that we've read. But that is a matter of subjective appreciation. And really, I don't have a lot to compare it with other, like, mid-1930s sci-fi, other than the stories that we've already read. So maybe it is a classic, like a well-known, really standout piece, compared with the vast majority of 1930s sci-fi. I just don't know. Anyway, it was a relatively short one. Our next story is from the April 1935 issue of Astounding Stories, and we will look at it on October 29th. And that one is The Lotus Eaters by Stanley G. Weinbaum. I don't know if I know this story or not. Probably don't. But that will be the next one. However, it'll be until next month before we do that. Next week, coming up on Archival Adventures, we're going to explore the invention of the walkie-talkie. And for reasons related to the invention of the walkie-talkie, I have some lovely Dick Tracy for us to look at. So that will be next Wednesday. It did do the whole people don't use the entirety of their brains. It did. It is a very old, very common trope that is inaccurate and an old wives' tale. Like, it's a not really. We would not want 100% of our brain active at the same time. That would seriously be a bad thing. The whole 10% of the brain is a simplification, and it's different areas of the brain activate or are more active depending on what you're doing and what you're thinking about, etc. You wouldn't want all of it on at once. Replace rays with pharmaceuticals and you get limitless, which I think is connected with Ted Chiang's understand. I suppose, like, that is interesting. And this could also, you could see it as like related to the superhuman or super soldier type trying to improve the person. In this case, that he was trying to increase the intelligence. And it was mentioned in some of the descriptive stuff we looked at before reading the story, that it was in line with other stuff. His work at the time, at least the sci-fi stuff, was focused on the idea of solving the world's problems. And so this scientist wanted to increase people's intelligence so that then they wouldn't have things like world wars and resource shortages and etc., because people would be too smart, and then they would realize that those things were wrong. And so there was the reference to Buckminster Fuller and the World Game, and sort of that push towards, or exploration of possible approaches towards a utopian society, etc. I'm willing to be a pretentious spoilsport when it comes to shutting down frequently reused tropes that are based on bad science. I mean, yes. So there are elements of the story that I think tie in, and it definitely fits within the broad scope of science fiction history, and the things that get discussed in sci-fi. But yeah, I think it's, I don't know. I think it's interesting to discuss. But yeah, next week we're going to look at the invention of the walkie-talkie with the Al Gross collection. Resource shortages are much oversold by those who are in the position to raise the price and make a profit of said thing. Indeed, that is true. I'm actually going to end up, I'm going to wrap up the stream and end early today, partly because the story is done, and partly because there is a big event happening on campus this evening, and so the quicker I can leave campus, the better. and by leaving slightly earlier, then I will avoid things. It is not football. Virginia Tech is hosting it's not football. Virginia Tech is hosting a Turning Point event. It was supposed to be Charlie Kirk and Megyn Kelly, and instead it's the Virginia governor and Megyn Kelly. But so parking restrictions have already started for it, and so the sooner I can vacate, just the better, because I don't know what size of crowd will actually show up. So I'm gonna see where we're gonna raid. I know that other places have been getting, like, I think it was CSU last week got about 10,000. The event here was always scheduled to be inside, and the auditorium only seats 3,000, but who knows how much overflow there will be. Let's see. well, I think we're going to head over and say hi to Steven. Because I enjoy rating Steven, and Steven has a lovely community, including multiple academic professionals and librarians. And I don't think Steven is currently playing Little Kitty Big City, although he has been recently, and that would have been highly appropriate for today. But it looks like the game today right now is Bibbidi Bibbidi. And then later will be Easy Delivery Company. I don't know. But Steven does tend to find some of the best games ever. So we'll pop on over there, say hello. Definitely, if it is your first time heading over, say hi and ask for a tiny hat. And I look forward to seeing all of you next week when we look at walkie-talkies. So we'll be in the 1930s again. But until then, keep exploring history, everybody. Yeah, I forgot to do the credits. They're not working. Thank you, everybody, for the bits and the raids and follows, and I will get things fixed. Anyway, keep exploring history, and see you later.